Kia ora tātou. Hello everyone, I'm Phil Clark from Sport New Zealand. Thank you for joining me for this quick talk on gender balance in sports news reporting here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Just a quick word about Sport New Zealand. We are the national or central government agency that oversees the play, active recreation and sport sector here in New Zealand. We also have a wholly owned subsidiary, High Performance Sport New Zealand, which helps sports athletes and teams to win on the world stage. We've got a multi-year study that's now into year 3 here in New Zealand. It covers about 40,000 media items a year. Because we're so small, we're lucky that means we can look at about a third of all sports coverage. That is randomly selected every day and analysed as we go. So it's online, print, radio, TV. It excludes match broadcasts. That's just too much and too hard, too costly to include in the study. So the primary objective for us was just to set a benchmark in terms of gender balance in sports news coverage. We hadn't had a study done in New Zealand for quite some time. They're quite rare things to happen around the world. We wanted to be able to use that data so that we and others could help drive positive change, and then through that work, ultimately to be able to shift the dial in gender balance in sports news coverage. We produce one main report every year, 2 of those so far. We're also producing case studies as we go. So some of those are focusing on pinnacle events, the Olympics. We've got one coming up on the Commonwealth Games. Because we're hosting World Cups here in New Zealand, we've got a chance to explore coverage around those too. So we've done Cricket World Cup. And then we're also producing deep dives as we go. So most of those are deep dives specific to sports to help inform their media engagement. We've also done some deep dives into specific media companies just to help them understand their kind of coverage and gender balance a bit more. And this is what the data is showing us, some extremely encouraging results. So in our first year, a baseline of 15%, bearing in mind a UNESCO study in 2018 had a global average of 4%, steady growth since then, so we're now at 25% in the first half of this year. Why is it so good here in New Zealand? Well, it's a team effort. The media are doing a better and better job at covering women's sport. We're getting more and more happening in terms of event delivery. We've got those 3 World Cups. Broadcasters are broadcasting more, which is feeding through into other media. So a lot of things working together, but extremely encouraging results. Through our case studies, we're also able to see the extent to which those big events can shift the dial within their kind of event windows. So 29% with the Tokyo Paralympics is not the gender balance of Paralympic Games coverage. That was about 75%. 29% is the proportion of all sports coverage within that event window, which was focused on women's sport. So this is really useful for us to be able to understand the extent to which we get spikes from those big events, which is particularly important for us in New Zealand because we're hosting 3 Women's World Cups. We track a whole bunch of different markers with the study, who the athlete is or who else the individuals that are quoted or mentioned might be, which sport, which event, all those sorts of things. But most of the markers relate to the way that athletes are portrayed in media coverage. That looks at portrayal through the written word, through imagery, through footage. The good news here in New Zealand is that any imbalance that previously existed has almost totally been ironed out. There was a study done by the New Zealand Olympic Committee around the Rio Olympics, which found quite significant imbalance in portrayal. Even from our first report in 2020, we found that had almost been eroded. This slide is indicative of what we see. So where there is the most weight of coverage, which you see here with result, performance and training preparation, it's fairly balanced gender-wise. You will get pockets of imbalance in something like here, off-field behaviour or on-field behaviour, but the weight of coverage attached to that marker is very, very small. And there's also no evidence of sexualisation in text or in imagery, which again is extremely encouraging. So as you've seen, we've got some really encouraging results when it comes to gender balance of coverage, not so much when it comes to bylines. Particularly low on the reporter side, which is where most of the kind of resources. So a drop in 2021 off a very low, very disappointing base. So there's a lot of room for improvement here. It is extremely hard to attract females into sports news journalism, particularly in the traditional print online media outlets. Much easier in television, and in fact in New Zealand our main 2 TV networks are around 50% females when it comes to their sports teams. However, that drop in bylines has led to a really important finding. So some people will say that to get more coverage of women's sport, you need more female sports journalists. We don't believe that that should be true, and now we know that it simply isn't true. So in New Zealand, we've got gender balance of coverage on the rise, despite a decline in gender balance of bylines. Now I'd like to share a bit about the stakeholder engagement that goes on alongside the research. The feedback I get regularly is that this is one of the most significant aspects of the work that we're doing. We're not letting the research just gather dust on a shelf. We are actively, regularly using it as the basis of conversations with sports, with media, with others, to open their minds to ways in which they can help drive positive change. And this kind of sums up my philosophy when it comes to that engagement. My very firm belief is that the more conversations that we can have, the more change that will help drive. And so there is this cycle of producing evidence or data through the reporting. The more we produce, the more opportunities there are for engagement. That engagement, more than anything, is shaping how we evolve the study. So every year we're adding more and more analysis to it, or digging deeper into existing areas. And the more we evolve, the more evidence we get, and around it goes. So like I said, more conversations, more change. Just some examples of how we use the data for change. So this, for media, is kind of the shop window, if you like, looking at how their overall gender balance of coverage stacks up against their competitors. We are extremely lucky that we only have 6 major media companies, so it makes it quite easy to do. As you'll see, all of them were up from 2020 to 2021, which is great. We've got 2 that are below the average, so some interesting conversations with them about what's holding them back and where they think they can improve. We also look at media companies by media type, so online, which you can see here, also radio, TV, and print. Again, in 2021, all media companies across all segments were up, but to be able to show them the difference in growth rates between one media type and another leads to interesting conversations, and always looking to better understand opportunities and barriers for media companies. Bylines is the more difficult conversation, as you can imagine, given those sorts of numbers. I'm really interested in the extent to which the data you see here compares with the reality of their newsroom. So Stuff, which is our biggest media company, has 22 sports journalists, 2 of which are female, so 10.3% is about right. News Hub has about 4 out of 9 that are female, so to only be at 5.4% means they've got some kind of work that they could do based on the people they already have. This is the entry level into engagement with sports. So being able to show them in the red there what their share of overall sports coverage is. And then on the left of that, the proportion of that which is focused on women's sport. Really significant thing to observe here is that those top 3 sports, rugby, cricket, football, that's association football, make up 60% of all the sports coverage in New Zealand. So my very firm belief is that if we want to shift the dial, we need to start with those 3 sports. The good news is that all of them have a stronger proportion of female coverage in 2021 than they did the year before. All 3 of them have a World Cup that's hosted or co-hosted in New Zealand. So there's massive opportunity to help them through the data to improve the gender balance of coverage in their sport. And another example of what we can show sports, this gets into something that's a bit more granular, but showing them how coverage of their sport year on year is balanced across different media outlets. And so for a sport like netball here, they've got weaker performance with TVNZ than they have with other networks. So that's an obvious conversation to have with TVNZ. And in the time I've got left with this lightning talk, I'd just like to leave you with a couple of final thoughts. Firstly, if you can measure it, you can change it. There's a lot of benefits that we're seeing out of this study, but all of those start with just the fact that we know where we stand. We wouldn't know that we're at 25% if we didn't have this study. So having that measurement in place is a really important thing. There's not a lot of these studies that go on around the world, so if you've got an opportunity to drive one forward, would encourage you to do it. Secondly, if you've got the data, work it. Don't let it gather dust. We're seeing real benefit from getting out there with the stakeholder engagement and using the data to open people's minds to how they can work differently to drive change. We're also seeing that engagement is feeding into how we evolve the study to strengthen it and make it better. So leaving it on a shelf or just simply emailing these reports out wouldn't be doing what we're getting through really significant stakeholder engagement. So that's the end of my lightning talk. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love to connect with you. If you're a delegate at the conference, I will be there. If not, or if you can't find me, that's my email address. Please connect at any time, and also the URL for the research. So everything we've published you can find there. Please take a look. Please enjoy it. Please connect if you'd like to. Thank you very much.